Hello, Shortcuts. This is Stephen here. This is video 1 for the price list, which will go out at 9 p.m. this Wednesday, the 17th of July, at 9 p.m. sharp, Sydney, Eastern Coast time. If you would like to be on that mailing list, drop me an email at shortcutsrecords@gmail.com. The details are in the notes in this channel. Now, I'm going to break with tradition. This first list today is an all Aussie list. Encompasses, I don't know if I've got any 90s, but we've definitely got 60s, 70s, and 80s. We'll see if there's any 90s. I don't think there is. All right, so there are many of you out there who are much more knowledgeable about Australian music than me. But what I've picked out here are a number of records that are maybe a little bit to the left, a little bit off the beaten path. Maybe not the typical record that might get chosen for this particular subset of Aussie artists. So here we go. Well, I couldn't think of a better place to start than Aussie surf rock. And I've got two examples from the 60s. Both are very famous. One, I think, is certainly in with a shout for the best Aussie album of the 60s. And I'm going to start with that record. And it is this. Evolution by Tamam Shud. Tamam Shud. I think it's Persian. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the translation is the very end. And that's interesting because this record came out at the very end of the 60s, 1969. And it was nominally the soundtrack to a movie called Evolution, which was a surf movie. And so my understanding of kind of reading about this is that these dudes traveled around with the crew for the movie, and the tracks were recorded pretty much live. Almost all of them are first takes. You can hear that they didn't have a big budget, and so it's pretty rough and ready. But it is it's wonderful. It is certainly the first Aussie album that I'm aware of where the boundaries are being pushed into psych rock, certainly prog rock, but way beyond the guitar histrionics of the second record on the list, which is Bombora by the Atlantics, or Great Surfing Sounds. So this came out in 63, and Evolution by Tamam Shud in 69. And the difference is stunning. Now, this record is a lot of fun. This is like the Shadows on speed. This is instrumental surf rock, tight as, quite psychedelic, kind of psychedelic in places, really nicely recorded. I know these guys recorded a bucket load of records because I see, from kind of like 63 to 66, you can just see Atlantics records everywhere. But this is the one to own, and this is a really, really nice copy on the Music for Pleasure label. And it sounds really nice too. There's lots of copies out there that sound pretty average, but these guys are a lot of fun. Really, really, really enjoyable. But this record, this is fantastic. Very, you're going to hear squalls of blues, psych guitar. Obviously, you've been listening to Jimi Hendrix. But also you will still hear that Aussie kind of melodic sensibility. And I love how raw it is. I love the fact that they kept the first takes. It's a great record. Now, there's a few in here that could well be a shout for best Aussie record of the 70s and 80s, but I think Evolution to Mam Should is in the running for the 60s for sure. Now, there's quite a few records here. I'm going to flick through some of them pretty quickly. I'll pause on a few, but you know a lot of these bands. So this is Rose Tattoo, and this is actually quite rare. This is a compilation of their greatest hits that kind of pulls quite heavily from their first 4 records, as you might imagine, on the Dino label. There's not many of these around. I've had quite a few people inquire after it, but I'm keeping it on the list because I think it's an interesting and fun record. So you've got, Rock and Roll Outlaw and all the classics, but it's also just not very common. Oh, excuse me. Wow. All right. So a couple more 80s classics here. So this is a really, really nice copy of Shaboo Shabba by INXS, their 3rd album. The One Thing, Black and White, etc. Now, this includes a really nice, fully intact copy of the lyrics sheet and that rather infamous picture. Now, I'm not a massive INXS fan, but I'm so, take this with a pinch of salt. But when I listen to this record, far more than any of the other records, I hear Duran Duran. I hear that new wave, harder edge pop. Anyway, Shaboo Shabba. Have I got that right? Shaboo Shabba. Is that right? Shaboo. Aye. It's an odd record too, though. I'm not sure I love it, but I know it's got its fans. But this next one I do love. This is in with a shout for the best Aussie record of the 80s, in my opinion. Now, I was listening to a countdown on YouTube that you can find. If you type in Stack Rank or the best records of the church, you'll find about 9 or 10 years ago, 2 Americans, I think they're from Atlanta. I can't remember, but I watched the whole thing, counting down their top 15 church records. And the reason I was prompted to do that is because on a little forum I'm in, we pick records and we listen to them and we review them, and it's a very small group. But the record last week that we were listening to was Seance by the church, which I didn't really know. And so I was kind of just, looking for some information on Seance. But I did know this record, Heyday, the church. This is the record that's got Tantalized, Myrrh. It is the record where I think Steve Kilbey really starts to find his singing voice. One of the things I noticed about Seance is how, to me, unsure he is vocally. And I know there's production challenges with that record. The Phil Collins snare drum does kind of clang a little bit, particularly in side 2. But there's lots of great stuff. But this one is fantastic from start to finish. Now, on the lists that those 2 American guys, and I don't know their names, and I've never watched another one of their videos. Seance was kind of down the list, but this one, Heyday, was right up there. I think it was number 2 or 3 for both of them. One of them had Starfish at number 1. I can't remember what the other one had at number 1. But anyway, the church. Okay, now we've got a run of 70s records that are really interesting. Now this is Jeff St. John's Copper Wine is the name of the band. And the album is called Joint Effort. So this is Ross East, Barry Kelly, Alan Ingham, Peter Figures. Now, this is an interesting one because Jeff St. John's kind of made his way through some pretty devastating illnesses and bits and pieces and became this powerhouse lead singer. But this record is more of a band effort. So you get kind of psychedelic instrumentals. You get really thoughtfully arranged and quite beautiful kind of album tracks deeper in the album. There's a lot of tracks on this record. That's one of the things that I noticed in listening to it. It could almost have been a double album. There's 12 tracks, and some of them are, quite chunky. Fanciful Flights is quite whimsical and of its time, but has a lot going for it. There's some really cool cover versions. Sing a Simple Song cover version, of course, of Sly and the Family Stone, and there's more than a few of those. Cloud 9 also a cover version, but yeah, really interesting. And so there's some rave reviews of this record online. It's very hard to find, and so this copy will probably go on sale for like $45 or something. I've seen it online for 3 times that much, but there you go. Jeff St. John's Copper Wine Joint Effort. Dig into that and see what you make of it. I'm convinced there's someone out there who will love that record. All right, we're going to stick with the 70s. A little bit earlier. This is the first album by... Was it the first album? I think pretty sure it is. The first album by the Dingoes. So the Dingoes are quite... I'm not going to say unique, but let's just say... differentiated from a lot of other Aussie bands of the 70s in that these guys, and there's the inner, are more kind of country rock. More Eagles, a bit rougher than the Eagles, but more like the Outlaws and bands like that from the Deep South. And of course, they did go and tour America and supported a number of those types of bands. Chris Stockley, Current Holdhorse, and those guys. And this is the record that includes what was probably their biggest hit, which was Way Out West, that the whole band contributed to. A really beautiful looking record, and you would not think that was an Aussie band, but as soon as you see the label they're on, Mushroom, then you know. Classic Aussie band, really kind of warm, melodic instrumentation. As you might imagine with country rock, if you're following the Byrds blueprint, you get the kind of harmonies and sweet vocals are all part of it. But it's really nice to hear Aussie take on that genre, really. I've still got quite a few to go. I'm going to have to speed up. But look at this. This is by far and away the most expensive record in tonight's list. This is the Aussie first press of the second Masters Apprentices album. This is called Masterpiece. This came a few years after their debut. Doug Ford, Glenn Wheatley, Colin Burgess, and Jim Keys. And this one leans a lot more into kind of prog, but it has very poppy moments as well. An iconoclastic Aussie record. There's the original orange label on the Columbia. This is the stereo version as well, because there's mono versions around, but you can see the stereo there. Masters Apprentices have probably become, over my time in Australia, one of my favourite Aussie bands, after literally having heard nothing of them before coming here. And they're a really, really great band, Choice Cuts and others, but the early kind of more garage sounds kind of really appeal to me. I love that raw Aussie sound from that era. And that is a very, very rare record. All right, we've got a couple of Japanese presses. You know, I might pull both of them. There's three Japanese presses? Yeah, there is 3 of various classic records. Let's see if I can pull out the third. There it is. So the Japanese first press of Paul Kelly's Gossip. The Japanese first press in amazing condition of the Divinyls' second album, What a Life. Now, this is more punky and harder edge than I was ever expecting. Chrissy Amphlett, an amazing, and probably my favourite of the 3, and this is a white label promo. Now, this record was voted number 51 in the list of the 100 greatest Aussie albums of all time. And I think that surprises people. But it is this, Don't Throw Stones by The Sports, the Japanese first press white label promo. I love this record. It's really cool. All right. You can explore those. I think Paul Kelly you all know. But The Sports have a kind of early Elvis Costello feel to it, which really works for me. And talking about kind of new wave, this is a very hard to find record, which is really new wave. This is the EP Four Fresh Lemons by Spy vs. Spy. Now, this record is incredibly hard to find. I saw this, or actually someone told me they saw it on the wall of Red Eye Records in Sydney for $500 just a few weeks ago. Now, their on-the-wall records are kind of nosebleedingly expensive. But this is really punky and really angular and almost sounds a bit like Wire. Very different to what they became. And therefore, I guess quite a desirable record if you're a fan. Okay, couple more to go. We got Richard Clapton's record, The Great Escape. Now, this is an early 80s record, and on the kind of pantheon of Richard Clapton records is considered just a little bit below Goodbye Tiger, but has its fans, and it's pretty cheap. And this is in really, really nice condition for those of you who are Richard Clapton fans. There's one other Japanese pressing before we go to the finish, and it is this. Now, this is super rare. This is the Japanese first press promo of Kylie's second single, Got to Be Certain, and this is the 12-inch promo. Got to Be Certain, and then Got to Be Certain, the Out for a Duckbill Platter plus dub mix, and then there's a 7-inch version as well by Stock Aitken and Waterman, as you might expect. That is a very expensive record indeed, and if you have a Kylie fan in your life and you want to get them a present of something that they will pretty surely never have, that is a good option. Okay, we got a few Aussie classics to go, and then we'll wrap this list up. Now, this, we were talking about what could be in for a shout with Tamam Shud's Evolution as the best Aussie album of the 60s. This surely is in the mix for the best Aussie album of the 70s. It is Toward the Blues by Chain. This is probably the first Aussie blues record I ever heard. I heard it a few years after getting here. Found a few really nice copies over the years, of which this is one, on the Pink Infinity label. Really nice copy. Plays beautifully. Fantastic copy, I would say. Now this, Matt Taylor's kind of guttural, kind of animalistic vocals, the most wonderful guitar and bass combo, really cool drums, leading the way to to one of the great, I think, Aussie singles of the 70s in black and blue with those chains that start the song. This is well worth a listen, and you play this one as loud as you can, as you do with this record. Now, this is a record I did not know, and it has become somewhat, I think, of a guilty pleasure. And that is Face to Face by the Angels, which, of course, is, it is clearly from the same family tree as AC/DC. But maybe because I'm overly familiar with AC/DC, listening to the Angels gives me a particular pleasure. And this record is right up there, Face to Face. Really, almost caricaturish because of just how familiar AC/DC is, but I really enjoy it. All right, two more obscure, but I think really interesting records to go, and then we'll wrap this up. This is the first live EP by Cold Chisel. The intriguingly named You're 13, You're Beautiful, and You're Mine, recorded live. Now this, look at him. There's Jimmy sucking on some panties. But this is interesting. I've never heard this record, and I only listened to it for the first time yesterday. And there are times when I think Jimmy doesn't know the lyrics. And he's either getting prompted, or he's trying to remember them, or he makes something else up. But I like this. I really don't like Cold Chisel at all. They're if I had to create a list of my least favourite Aussie bands, they'd be right at the bottom. But this is more palatable than just about anything else they did. And even then, I'd struggle to put it on. But I know that there's plenty out there who are fans. And this is on the Electro label. Look at that. Beautiful label too. Cold Chisels, You're 13, You're Beautiful, and Your Mind's Aussie first press, of course. And then finally, the record in 1974, the year of my birth, that was the nominated as the Australian Record of the Year. I wonder how many of you know what this is. The answer is Free Fall Through Featherless Flight by Jeannie Lewis. And look at the back sleeve. What is that? Such a weird record. There she is. I do love the sleeve. The sleeve is wonderful. Look at that. And what is this? This is prog, folk, and jazz played by what are clearly a group of top musicians with a singer-songwriter who is singular, rather weird, and rather great. And so I totally get why this record was so lauded in 74. And Jeannie Lewis went on to have a really wide, kind of varied and interesting career. I'm not sure she ever topped this one, though. Cover art, Martin Sharp. There's a long list of musicians on this, as long as you can go. And it's got a string quartet in it. Obviously, back in the 70s, these quartets were recorded live. And you can really tell. And there's a Minogue synthesizer that runs through this as well, which probably dates it for this period, but it's really interesting. The kind of harpsichord sounds come through as well, but that's that folk, that kind of folk backing. But there you go. Free Fall from Featherless Flight by Jeannie Lewis. The Aussie Record of the Year, 1974. There you have it. Kind of varied and hopefully interesting Aussie list that some of you will dip into and see if you enjoy. And thank you so much if you've watched this far. If you would like to be on the mailing list for the prices for that list, drop me a line, shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. If you liked what you heard, kind of hit the like button or comment. Thank you so much. Bye.